So, Jode Garcha, PASW's client, talked to me privately and said, you know, I really like this guy, Ben Webster. You ever going to do something about him? And so, yes, I'd been wanting to get to this gentleman. We talked about him briefly when we did a film scoring class for Phantom Thread. Johnny Greenwood said he got influence from the pianist Glenn Gould and also this gentleman we're going to be talking about. So, Joe, thank you for reminding me to do this because I've been wanting to get to this guy. Here's a question. Can instrumentalists purr? You know, cats purr, right? It shows you that they love you. Lions and tigers do not purr. The rule of thumb is that if you can roar, then you can't purr. So cats can't roar, so they can purr. You can, tune in later to my class on animals and, the biology of animals later. But this instrumentalist, he purrs on the saxophone. Let's see if you agree. Why don't you just guess who I'm talking about? I'll tell you. Today we're going to be talking about the lovely purring sound of Ben Webster. Ben Webster, yes, Jode. American jazz tenor saxophone. We've looked at many tenor saxophone players. I mean, when you think of tenor, maybe Coltrane's probably the most famous jazz saxophone. So we've gone over these different types of saxophones because same fingerings but different ranges, right? So baritone is the lowest, then it's tenor, and then it's alto, and it's soprano. So that goes from low to high. So he's in the tenor section. Born in 1909, born the same year as Lester Young. We did a class on Lester Young, beautiful breathy saxophonist. Lester and Ben are going to have a lot of similarities as well with Coleman Hawkins, who we have yet to do a class on, but Coleman Hawkins was a little bit older than them, just 5 years older or so. So let's leave Faré's home from the south of France and go to Kansas City and let's just visually see. So this is 1909. So this is when jazz is beginning, right? Tin Pan Alley's going on, Urban Berlin's writing the songs, Jerome Kern's writing the songs. These guys are going to, by the 20s and 30s, along with Duke Ellington, Count Basie, jazz and swing is gonna be taking over, right? So people like Lester Young, Ben Webster are playing with Duke Ellington and their big bands. Then they're going to become soloists, So people kind of say Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, those were the two camps. Ben Webster tried and successfully did his own sound. So those three sounds were just so distinct, and he really just developed an original style. How did he get that style? I don't know. We don't know how geniuses get their style. It's just sometimes it's brokenness inside or happiness inside. So as a kid, he studied violin and then learned to play the blues on the piano because blues is going on, because that comes from jazz many times in Dixieland. So he was playing the piano and then he switched to tenor saxophone because he fell in love with it. So he played with Lester Young, actually in the Young family band, and starts playing in bands in the 30s. Swing music, right? That's the big thing. So he became a soloist in Duke Ellington's band, so from 1940, and along with Johnny Hodges, who's another saxophone player that we'll talk about. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of trumpet players around too, and a lot of other instrumentalists, but saxophone was it's kind of a newer instrument, you know, maybe just 100 years old or so. So people were exploring the newness of it. Then he goes to New York, because you have to go to New York. You know, 52nd Street, we've talked about New York City being, you know, the mecca of all this great jazz. He was a sideman and also, you know, a leader at some point, and worked with Raymond Scott. We talked about Raymond Scott, the really brilliant engineer guy, but, you know, had a great jazz band, and wrote all of those really great songs that Carl Stalling would arrange, right, for Warner Brothers cartoons. But Raymond Scott wrote a lot of those songs. So he plays with him. Then in the 50s, plays with Jerry Mulligan, another saxophone player. And they played a club in Los Angeles. This is in the 50s, called Renaissance. But a lot of guys, Eric Dolphy, a lot of these jazz guys, especially with the 60s, why? Because, well, Beatlemania, it's hard to really keep up with that. And by the 60s, it wasn't like jazz was going away, but definitely rock and roll and pop music was becoming more popular. So a lot of these guys went to Europe. Europeans loved jazz. They embraced these guys. And so 64 moves to Europe. Mostly spends the rest of his life there, in Scandinavia, so Amsterdam, and then his home was in Denmark, in Copenhagen, until he suffered a stroke in Amsterdam in 1973. So what are you guys hearing? Vibrato, right? The shakiness. It doesn't sound like nerves though. He's purring with this instrument. Dynamics. Playing loud, playing soft. Very, very much in control of the sound. You hear a real, like, just very raw loneliness going on. He's crying almost through the instrument, but crying perhaps tears of joy, tears of sadness. Ballads were just, he's caressing the instrument. He's embracing it. He's creating such a romantic mood. So if you guys ever need to set the mood at, you know, for dinner parties, which you guys throw a lot, put on, you know, you can put on one of his albums. But one thing, and this is what kind of kept him not so much in vogue, because he's not like Charlie Parker at all, not like John Coltrane at all. He's not playing fast, up-tempo stuff like that. That's just not his style, and he's creating a really personal sound. So a lot of times ballads are a good way to express that, those personal sounds. We talked about personal, you know, musicians, artists, they're all personal. Some are more commercial, some can do both. Some are just really into, you know, introspection on their instrument, where they do the talking. The instrument does the talking for them. I think he was a sad man and suffered a lot of loneliness and all that stuff in his private life. So, you know, you can kind of hear it in some of his playing. tone color too, right? I mean, if you think of the tone of his instrument, very colorful. Doesn't sound, because there's vibrato, there's breathiness, there's these things. So he's painting a solo almost in a sense. Broad strokes. We looked at strokes yesterday with Impressionism, Monet and those strokes. It's cool how you can do that in painting and also in music with your mouthpiece, how you blow into the instrument. And a lot of floating on top. It sounds like he's floating, right? I mean, some of these passages are gorgeous passages where he's floating on top of the notes. Irregular rhythm sometimes. It's kind of that, like, I'm just throwing out ideas as we listen to just his gorgeous tone. One writer said it sounded like a cello sometimes, because his range was low. I mean, tenor has the lower range anyway, but he really embraced that lower tone a lot. I thought, that's a pretty good point. One thing I do love about his playing is his tenderness, very deep tenderness in his playing. Joy, loneliness, all coming out of this instrument. So just a brief little taste of Ben Webster. Great, and Jode, thank you for inspiring me to do this, because I'd been wanting to talk about Ben Webster. Just one of my favorites. Really is. I mean, it became one of my favorites. I didn't start really knowing and understanding his music till actually more recently, and so thank you for the recommendation, and hope you guys enjoyed just the smooth sounds. This was just a really cool, relaxing, cat-like day, right? With the purr. He was purring through that instrument. Think about that. Okay, I'll be here tomorrow, and we'll do it again. Okay, bye.